I think Tuesday's General Hospital episode is setting up several storylines that could have major consequences, especially now that Drew Kane is back. To me, his return doesn't feel like the end of a mystery. It feels like the beginning of a much bigger conflict. One of the first things I noticed is the return of Marshall Ashford. It looks like he'll finally have a chance to meet his grandson, Desmond Ashford, and I think those family moments will provide a nice emotional break from everything else happening in Port Charles. Marshall will also praise Portia Robinson, which could be a reminder that not every storyline has to revolve around chaos. Meanwhile, Jocelyn Jacks is about to deal with the fallout from her biggest secret being exposed. Emma Scorpio Drake is furious after learning about Jocelyn's WSB connection, music, and I can understand why. From Emma's perspective, this probably feels like a huge betrayal. Trina Robinson ends up caught in the middle, trying to calm things down. Before the confrontation gets completely out of control, I have a feeling this friendship won't recover overnight. Another storyline that caught my attention involves Rocco Falconry. Scout Quatermain tries to encourage him to make peace with Danny Morgan and Charlotte Cassadine, but Rocco doesn't seem convinced that reconciliation is even possible. Sometimes in General Hospital, the younger characters mirror the conflicts of the adults, and this situation feels like another example of that. On a much happier note, Jason Morgan finally returns home after his WSB ordeal. Carly Spencer welcomes him with an emotional hug, and Sonny Corinthos is just as relieved to see him back. I think these scenes will remind viewers why Jason has always been such an important part of this family. After everything he's been through, seeing him reunited with Carly and Sonny should be one of the episode's most satisfying moments. However, not everything is going smoothly for Michael Corinthos. He makes a decision that completely confuses Jacinda Bracken. Whether it has something to do with his new WSB shares or his position regarding Willow Kane, Jacinda clearly doesn't understand his thinking. I was wondering if this is the first real crack in their relationship. Summer previews already hint that Jacinda believes she knows what's best and may take matters into her own hands in a Willow-related situation. If that happens, I think their romance could be headed towards serious trouble and possibly even a breakup. The biggest storyline, though, is undoubtedly Drew Kane. Willow is completely shaken when Drew suddenly appears before her. After everything that's happened, seeing him alive is shocking enough, but what really stands out is Drew's attitude. Instead of simply returning, he talks about revenge, and Willow immediately begins fearing just how far he's willing to go. To me, that's the biggest question heading into this storyline. Is Drew acting purely out of anger, or is he planning something much more calculated? At the same time, Nina Reeves and Jack Brennan receive another shocking update. They already know Drew survived, but Giovanni Gio Palmieri reveals something even more alarming. Drew refused treatment at General Hospital and went straight to Willow's house. That changes everything. I think Nina and Brennan will immediately realize Willow could be in real danger. If Drew is motivated by revenge instead of reconciliation, every minute matters. Their next move could become a race against time to reach Willow before the situation spirals out of control. I'm also very interested in Brennan's role moving forward. The spoilers suggest he has damaging information about Drew that hasn't been revealed yet. That makes me wonder whether Brennan has been holding on to evidence that could completely change how everyone views Drew. If that's true, this secret could become one of the biggest turning points in the storyline. Overall, I think Tuesday's episode is less about celebrating Drew's return and more about exploring the consequences of it. Jason's homecoming brings hope, but Drew's comeback brings fear. Michael and Jaxie's relationship appears to be entering dangerous territory. Jocelyn faces the fallout of her exposed secret, and Nina and Brennan may find themselves racing to stop a disaster before it's too late. Of course, I may be right or wrong, but that's how I see these spoilers coming together. If the episode unfolds the way it's being teased, Port Charles could be on the verge of one of its most explosive weeks in recent memory. I think Drew Kane is about to reach a major turning point, and the biggest question isn't whether he wants revenge, it's how far he's actually willing to go. After everything he's been through, it's completely understandable why Drew would be furious. Surviving after Nina Reeves pushed him into the lake is one thing, but returning home only to confront Willow Kane in the darkness makes it feel like he's finally ready to unleash all the anger he's been holding on to. But I was wondering if Drew's revenge plan is about to run into an unexpected obstacle. Jack Brennan is now in possession of damaging evidence from his black box, and that could completely shift the balance of power. If Brennan hands over proof that Drew misappropriated campaign funds, then suddenly Drew isn't the one holding all the cards anymore. Instead of being able to expose Willow and Nina to the police, he could find himself vulnerable to blackmail. To me, that's what makes this storyline so interesting. Drew wants justice, or maybe revenge, but he also has his own secrets to protect. If those campaign finance allegations become public, prison could become a very real possibility for him. At the same time, I don't think Drew is likely to forget what Willow and Nina allegedly did. From his perspective, they've crossed lines that are far more personal. Even if they're able to threaten him with Brennan's evidence, I can still imagine Drew looking for a way to strike back. Maybe I'm wrong, but I could even see Drew arguing that he could negotiate some kind of immunity by cooperating with authorities and exposing not only Willow, but also Jordan Sidwell. If that's where his mind goes, then Brennan's leverage alone may not be enough to stop him, at least initially. Music, however, I have a feeling another factor could completely change Drew's thinking. Music Scout Quatermain may become the person who reminds Drew what truly matters. If he shares an emotional reunion with his daughter and sees how happy she is that he's alive, I think that moment could outweigh his desire for immediate revenge. When I look back at everything Drew has already lost, it's easy to understand why that would affect him. He lost precious time with Scout during the fake stroke ordeal and the repeated paralytic injections. Before that, he spent time in Pentonville, and even earlier, he endured captivity. His life has been defined by separation and missed opportunities. Because of that, I think the last thing Drew wants now is to risk losing even more years behind bars. That doesn't necessarily mean he'll forgive Willow and Nina. In fact, Music, I don't believe that's where the story is headed at all. Instead, I think Drew may decide that keeping his freedom is more important than seeing them arrested. If that's the case, he could abandon the idea of turning them over to the PCPD and start searching for a much more strategic form of revenge. Sometimes the most effective payback isn't immediate, and I wouldn't be surprised if Drew begins playing a much longer game. Of course, this is only my interpretation of where the story could be going. General Hospital has a way of surprising viewers when characters are forced to choose between revenge and the people they love most. Drew appears to be facing exactly that kind of crossroads, and whatever decision he makes could have lasting consequences for everyone involved. I think Jason Morgan is about to face one of the biggest relationship tests of his reunion with Britt Westbourne. Music, and it may have nothing to do with their feelings for each other. Instead, it all comes down to a secret that Britt chose to keep buried for far too long. From my perspective, Britt made a huge mistake by never telling Jason that Cassius Weston had been impersonating Nathan West. After she finally confessed everything else about Jen Sidwell, Ross Collam, and the dangerous project she was forced into, it feels like that was the perfect moment to reveal the entire truth. Instead, she left out the most explosive part of the story. Maybe I'm wrong, but that omission could end up hurting Jason far more than any of the other revelations. Because of Britt's silence, Cassius was able to continue living as Nathan without anyone suspecting the truth. During that time, he grew close to James West, became romantically involved with Lulu Spencer, Music, and even worked alongside the PCPD while everyone believed he was someone else. The situation became even more dangerous when Jocelyn Jacks and Carly Spencer were unknowingly placed in harm's way. Although Cassius later helped cover up Rocco Falconry's involvement in Ross Collam's shooting on the pier, I don't think that erases everything that happened beforehand. One good deed doesn't automatically wipe away months of deception. What makes this even worse, in my opinion, is that Jason probably won't hear the truth directly from Britt. Even during their recent reunion at General Hospital, she still chose not to tell him how long she had known about Cassius's true identity. That silence could become just as damaging as the original secret. I was wondering if Anna Devane could be the person who unintentionally blows everything apart. With Peter August continuing to encourage Anna to seek revenge against Britt, it wouldn't be surprising if Anna brings up Britt's involvement when she reconnects with Jason. Their upcoming conversation could easily turn toward Britt's actions, leaving Jason blindsided by information he never expected to hear from someone else. If that happens, I think Jason will have no choice but to confront Britt. She may finally admit that she knew Nathan was an imposter from the very beginning, but stayed silent because she believed her Huntington's disease medication depended on her cooperation. Of course, she has since learned that the medication was nothing more than saline, because she never actually had Huntington's disease. Even with that explanation, I'm not sure Jason will see things the same way. He has always valued honesty and loyalty, especially from the people closest to him. Learning that Britt kept such a major secret, one that ultimately endangered people he cares about, could leave him questioning whether he can truly trust her. To me, this feels like the kind of storyline that doesn't destroy a relationship overnight, but slowly creates emotional cracks. Jason may understand why Britt was frightened, yet still struggle to forgive the fact that she never trusted him enough to tell the truth when she finally had the chance. Whether those cracks eventually lead to a breakup remains to be seen. Soap operas often take unexpected music turns, and relationships can recover from even the biggest betrayals. Still, if these spoilers are accurate, Jason and Britt could be heading into one of the most emotional chapters of their romance, with trust, not love, becoming the biggest obstacle they have to overcome. I think Alexis Davis is about to face one of the biggest shocks she's had in a long time on General Hospital. If these spoilers play out the way they seem to be heading, she could walk into her own home Music and discover Drew Kane standing there with Scout, a moment that completely changes everything. For months, Scout has been living with Alexis because everyone believed Drew had suffered a devastating stroke that left him trapped in locked-in syndrome. At least, that's what everyone was led to believe. As viewers know, the truth was much darker. Willow Kane had secretly been drugging Drew with a paralytic supplied by Jen Sidwell, keeping him completely under control while everyone assumed his condition was irreversible. Even before Sidwell's arrest, though there were subtle hints that Drew was fighting his way back, small finger movements and other tiny signs suggested he wasn't as helpless as he appeared. At the same time, I couldn't help noticing how increasingly anxious Willow and Nina Reeves became. The more Drew showed signs of recovery, the more desperate they seemed to keep their secret buried. Everything finally exploded during Scout's swim practice at the Quartermain Lake. In what may go down as one of the show's most shocking moments, Nina pushed Drew, wheelchair and all, into the water. Nina immediately believed she had killed him. Panicked, she confessed as much to Jack Brennan, and the two rushed toward the Quartermain boathouse. But by the time they arrived, Geo Palmieri had already rescued Drew. What happened next was even more disturbing. Nina kept the incident from Willow, but Willow soon realized something was terribly wrong. She found muddy footprints and mud tracked across the floor, and before she could make sense of it, Drew suddenly appeared at the door. He slammed it shut and confronted her, not as a helpless patient, but as a man who had fully regained his mobility. The sinister threat he delivered made it clear that the balance of power had completely shifted. Meanwhile, Geo informed Nina and Brennan that Drew hadn't died at all. In fact, he appeared to have regained his full physical abilities after ending up in the lake. At least for now, Geo doesn't seem to suspect Nina intentionally tried to harm Drew. But I wonder how long that will last once more pieces of the story come together. It also seems likely that news of Drew's miraculous recovery will spread quickly through the Quartermain family. After everything they've been through, this revelation is bound to send shockwaves across Port Charles. One moment from the latest General Hospital weekly promo especially caught my attention. Scout opens what appears to be Alexis' front door, freezes in surprise and quietly says, "Dad," to me Music. This strongly suggests that Drew has returned to see his daughter in person. Even more surprising, he's standing on his own 2 feet with no wheelchair and no visible signs of paralysis. If that's really what's happening, Alexis is going to be completely blindsided. I also wonder whether her first concern will be Danny Morgan. Before Drew's medical crisis, he was firmly against Danny and Scout spending time together. That created constant tension between the families. However, circumstances have changed significantly. Willow had the restraining order lifted, allowing Danny and Scout to spend time together again. During the period when Jason Morgan was being held captive, both children were living with Alexis, and that arrangement helped bring a sense of stability back into their lives. I also keep thinking about an earlier emotional scene before Drew ended up in the lake. While watching Scout swim, she expressed a simple wish. She wanted peace. She wanted her family to stop fighting. Danny echoed that hope, asking if he and Scout could finally be together without all the conflict surrounding them. Maybe Drew's near-death experience has changed his perspective. Maybe facing mortality has forced him to reconsider what's truly important. Or maybe I'm reading too much into the situation. Either way, I think Drew's unexpected return is going to raise far more questions than answers. His recovery exposes months of deception, threatens to unravel Willow and Nina's carefully guarded secret, and could permanently reshape several relationships in Port Charles. The biggest question now isn't whether Drew survived, it's what he's planning to do next, and whether forgiveness is even possible after everything that's happened. I think one of the biggest surprises in General Hospital lately isn't just what's happening on screen, it's what's happening behind the scenes with Ethan Lovett. Nathan Dean has officially wrapped up his run as Ethan and his departure has now been confirmed. I noticed that he had already disappeared from the contract section of the closing credits, which was an early clue that something had changed. Now we know why. In the July 27th episode, the show officially introduced Christian Howard as the new Ethan Lovett, confirming that the role has been recast. What makes this change so unusual, at least to me, is music, the timing. Ethan's current storyline doesn't seem like it's going to last much longer. Based on what we've been hearing about upcoming episodes, it looks like Ethan is preparing to leave Port Charles almost as soon as this recast begins. From what I understand, Ethan's past is finally catching up with him, forcing him to go on the run. I could be right or wrong, but it seems connected to the arrival of a mysterious new character named Hudson, who is set to make his debut on July 30th. That timing feels too deliberate to be a coincidence. Then, on July 31st, Ethan is expected to reveal some major news to Lulu Spencer. I was wondering if this could be the moment he tells her he's leaving town. If that's the case, I imagine Lulu won't simply accept his explanation. She'll probably press him for answers, sensing that he's hiding something much Bigger, whether Ethan tells her the whole truth or avoids her questions, remains to be seen. The recast itself raises some interesting questions. If Ethan is leaving almost immediately, why replace Nathan Dean at all? To me, music, that's the biggest mystery behind this casting change. One possibility is that Nathan Dean simply wasn't available to finish filming the remaining scenes, making a last-minute recast necessary. That would certainly explain why Christian Howard stepped into the role so quickly. On the other hand, I think there's another possibility worth considering. Maybe the writers already know Ethan won't stay off screen for very long. If his time on the run is only temporary, Christian Howard could return for the next phase of the storyline, especially if some long-running secrets are finally about to come out. One mystery that immediately comes to mind is the truth about Phoebe's biological father. I may be right or wrong, but if the show is building toward a reveal of that magnitude, it would make sense to establish Christian Howard as Ethan now, rather than waiting until later. Regardless of the reason, audiences are now seeing a different Ethan Lovett on screen, and the reaction has been immediate. Fans have been sharing their opinions across social media, with some welcoming Christian Howard's interpretation of the character, while others are still adjusting after Nathan Dean's exit. Whether this turns out to be a temporary change or the beginning of a much longer run for Christian Howard remains an open question. I think the answer will depend on where Ethan's storyline goes after he leaves Port Charles, and whether his past is really finished with him, or if it's only just beginning to reshape his future. I think Gio has quietly become one of the busiest and most important characters on General Hospital. It almost feels like he's everywhere right now. He's juggling his job as a lifeguard at the Metro Court pool. He's starting an exciting new chapter. After signing a record deal with Trina's help, he's spending time with his sister Phoebe and his girlfriend Emma, and then out of nowhere, he ends up rescuing Drew Kane from the lake. To me, that rescue could have much bigger consequences than it first appeared. The interesting part is that Gio had no idea Drew's fall into the water wasn't an accident. From his perspective, he simply saw someone in danger and reacted like any trained lifeguard would. He used his skills to save Drew's life, without realizing that Nina had deliberately pushed Drew and his wheelchair into the lake. After pulling Drew to safety, Gio informed Nina and Jack about what had happened before Drew eventually left. I was wondering if Gio's biggest role now isn't the rescue itself, but the news he'll have to deliver afterward. The spoilers say his update leaves the Quartermaines rattled, and I think that's probably because Drew is back in the picture. Considering how strained his relationship with the family has become, it's understandable why his return would make everyone nervous. That said, maybe the situation won't unfold exactly as everyone expects. I think there's a chance Drew's anger is focused elsewhere. Music, if he's looking for revenge, his attention may be on Nina, Willow, and Sidwell rather than the Quartermaines. After all, Tracy already agreed to let Drew return to the Quartermaine estate so he could watch Scout swim, and Jason even suggested it might be time for everyone to begin a new chapter. Michael's attitude also caught my attention. Even though he admitted he didn't believe this experience would completely change Drew, he still made it clear that nobody deserved what happened to him. Then there's Scout, who encouraged her father to get along with everyone. Music, maybe those words actually reached Drew. Combined with Gio saving his life, this experience could push Drew toward making different choices instead of immediately seeking revenge against the Quartermaines. Meanwhile, another storyline seems ready to heat up through Michael's growing influence at Deception. After Maxie moved to Australia with her family, she sold her Deception shares to Michael. He promised to make decisions based on what was best for the company, not simply side with Tracy and Brooklyn against Lucy. That wasn't exactly the answer Tracy wanted to hear, although Michael and Brooklyn eventually formed a cousin alliance. Now the spoilers say Michael will assert his power, and I think this is probably connected to his new position at Deception. It may be the first real opportunity to show everyone exactly how he intends to run the business, Music, and whether he'll truly stay independent. Another person who could be deeply affected by Drew's return is Alexis. She's been spending a lot of time with Scout, and Scout clearly loves having her father in her life. If Drew is back for good, then Alexis may have to adjust to a very different family dynamic, and I imagine some important conversations are on the horizon. Elsewhere, Trina and Kai are expected to jump to conclusions. We don't yet know exactly what they'll misunderstand, but if history is any indication, assumptions could easily create unnecessary drama before the truth comes out. Then there's Ava, whose suspicions continue to grow. I think she may be keeping a close eye on Ethan, although it's also possible her concerns are really about Nina. If Drew learns the truth about who pushed him into the lake, Nina could find herself facing consequences she never anticipated. Ava may already sense that everything is about to unravel. Overall, I think Gio's rescue could end up being the event that connects all of these storylines. What looked like a simple act of heroism may become the catalyst for major changes involving Drew, the Quartermaines, Michael's business ambitions, Alexis, and Nina. Whether Drew chooses forgiveness or revenge remains the biggest question. But either way, Gio's actions may have changed the direction of several lives without him even realizing it. I think Bradford Anderson just gave fans a surprisingly honest glimpse into how he feels about Spinelli's future on General Hospital. While he delivered it with plenty of humor, I couldn't help but feel there was some real frustration behind the jokes. Right now, the writers have sent Spinelli to Australia with Maxie Jones and the kids, effectively taking him out of the day-to-day action in Port Charles. From a story standpoint, it explains his absence, but to me, it also feels like the character has been quietly pushed to the sidelines. What really caught my attention was a recent episode of That's Awesome with Steve Burton and Bradford Anderson. During the conversation, Bradford joked about Peter August continuing to get screen time, even though Peter is technically dead. Since Peter is only appearing in Anna Devane's hallucinations as part of her mental health storyline, Bradford laughed and wondered why Spinelli couldn't at least show up in someone else's visions. He joked, "Why can't I be in your head or somebody's head? I just want to be on screen, put me in somebody's head." I thought that was hilarious, but it also sounded like an actor who genuinely misses being part of the show's biggest stories. Then he took the joke even further by saying that maybe Spinelli would actually work more if the character died. Steve Burton immediately played along, imagining ghost Spinelli music floating around Port Charles and haunting everyone. It was a funny exchange, and it's obvious neither of them was seriously suggesting killing off Spinelli. Still, I think the conversation revealed something fans have probably noticed for quite a while. Bradford Anderson would clearly love to have a bigger role again. Spinelli's recent appearances have mostly revolved around spending time with Maxie, Georgie, Bailey Louise, and now Music James, as the family officially relocates to Australia. Every new development seems designed to explain why Spinelli isn't around, and I was wondering if this is becoming the show's long-term plan for the character. Maybe I'm wrong, but with Spinelli now living and working overseas, I don't expect his screen time to increase anytime soon, unless the writers create a storyline that specifically requires his hacking skills or personal involvement back in Port Charles. He could remain an occasional guest rather than a regular presence. That said, one thing I appreciate about the way General Hospital handles characters is that the door is rarely completely closed. Spinelli isn't gone forever, he's simply living somewhere else, which means the writers can always bring him back whenever the story needs him. I think many longtime viewers would welcome that return. Spinelli has always added a unique mix of intelligence, humor, loyalty, and heart to the show. Even after all these years, he still fills a role that no other character quite does. For now, though, it looks music, like fans may have to get used to seeing much less of him. Whether that's only temporary or becomes the new normal remains to be seen. But Bradford Anderson's comments, certainly music, made it clear that if he had his way, Spinelli would already be back in Port Charles with a lot more to do. I don't think Nina reached the docks and suddenly lost her mind. Music, to me, this was a decision that had been building long before she stood face to face with Drew. The shocking moment of pushing a wheelchair-bound Drew into the water didn't begin at the docks. It began the moment Nina convinced herself that every other option had disappeared. By the time Willow called with the devastating news that Jack had failed to recover the evidence exposing Drew's crimes, Nina already believed hope was slipping away. Without that black box, the proof they were counting on had vanished, and it felt as if their entire plan had collapsed. Jack's response only reinforced the urgency. His solution was to fly Willow, her children, and Nina out of the country that very night under new identities, abandoning everything they had ever known. From Nina's perspective, I can understand why that felt like the end of the road. She had watched Willow spiral further into fear, while Drew remained the biggest threat standing between her daughter and any chance of freedom. Chase was arriving to question Willow. The authorities were closing in, and Jack's escape plan demanded they leave their entire lives behind without looking back. To Nina, the walls weren't simply closing in, they had already closed. But when I look at the situation, I still think there were other possibilities. None of them were easy, and none promised a perfect outcome, but they existed. Nina could have reached out to Alexis, Jason Morgan, Valentin Cassadine, or even waited a little longer for Jack to return her call. Instead, she reached a point where every passing second felt like another defeat. Once that mindset took over, Drew stopped being a person in her eyes and became the final obstacle she believed had to be removed. The turning point came after Danny and Scout left the boathouse. Alone with Drew, Nina discovered something that changed music everything. He could speak. That revelation should have opened the door to a different decision because it confirmed Willow's fears were real. Yet I think it also intensified Nina's panic. Music, Drew wasn't helpless anymore. He now had the ability to tell his side of the story, expose people, music, and potentially destroy everything Nina was desperately trying to protect. Before acting, Nina called Jack and warned Music, him that he needed to respond before someone did something they could never take back. Looking back, that phone call almost feels like a final plea for someone else to stop what she already sensed she was about to do. When no immediate solution came, Drew taunted her with the bad news, and Nina unlocked his wheelchair before pushing him into the water. She didn't act on pure impulse. She warned that something irreversible was coming, and then she followed through. I think that distinction is important because it changes how I view the scene. This wasn't a random outburst of rage. It was the tragic conclusion of mounting fear, desperation, and the belief that she alone had to protect the people she loved. Whether that belief was right or wrong is another question entirely. But by that point, Nina seemed convinced there was no other path left. Still, desperation and justification are not the same thing. I can understand how Nina arrived at this horrifying decision without believing it was the right one. Her love for Willow and her grandchildren had transformed into an unwavering conviction that eliminating Drew was the only way to save them. That explains her state of mind, but I'm not sure it excuses what she did. If anything, it makes the tragedy even greater music, because once that wheelchair rolled into the water, there was no taking the decision back. The episode delivers one shocking twist after another with attempted murder. Emotional reunions, dangerous bargains, and long-buried secrets threatening to explode. I think this was one of those episodes where almost every storyline moved forward in a major way. Nina crosses a dangerous line. After everything that happened previously, Nina is completely unraveling. Jack had promised to help Willow and her family disappear, but when he doesn't immediately respond to her desperate phone call, Nina reaches a breaking point. When Drew approaches her, he notices something is wrong and asks if she has received bad news. Her response is chilling. She tells him the news is bad for me, worse for you, before shoving him straight into the lake. She waits expecting him to come back to the surface, but he never does. Calling his name repeatedly, panic begins replacing her anger. Believing she has just killed Drew, Nina runs away in complete shock. I was wondering whether Drew is actually dead. Soap operas rarely kill off major characters this quietly, especially without showing a body. To me, this feels more like the beginning of a larger mystery than the end of Drew's story, although I could be wrong. Jack makes a deal with Valentine. Meanwhile, Jack finally comes face to face with Valentine over the mysterious black box. Valentine knows exactly how valuable it is and refuses to hand it over without getting something music in return. His demand is simple: restore all of his frozen financial accounts. Joss thinks Valentine is pushing his luck, but Valentine reminds everyone that he has leverage. Jack eventually agrees, instructing Joss to unfreeze the accounts. Once Valentine delivers the black box, Jack eagerly opens it and discovers the files he has been searching for. His complete dossier on Drew. Before he can even process what he's found, Nina storms in with an even bigger revelation. Nina confesses everything. Still shaken, Nina blurts out that she has just killed Drew. Jack is clearly surprised, admitting he never believed Nina was capable of something like that. Nina explains she almost called emergency services, but Drew never resurfaced after falling into the water. Instead of reporting the incident, she asked Jack to help cover everything music up. I think this creates an impossible situation for Jack. If he helps Nina, he risks becoming part of a criminal cover-up. If he refuses, Nina may completely fall apart or expose everything herself. Valentine and Joss reach an uneasy understanding. After the deal is complete, Valentine and Joss share a quieter conversation. Joss's mother remains deeply concerned about her daughter's involvement with the WSB, but Valentine reminds her that he once saved her life. Joss acknowledges that she is grateful, yet makes it clear that gratitude has limits. Their relationship remains complicated, built on mutual respect but never complete trust. With his accounts restored, Valentine walks away having secured exactly what he wanted. Jason and Britt finally reunite. The emotional centerpiece of the episode belongs to Jason and Britt. When Britt unexpectedly sees Jason, her first reaction is disbelief. Instead of embracing him, she slaps him across the face. The moment is surprisingly understandable. She has spent so much time believing he was gone music that anger becomes the first emotion to surface. Jason follows her into an examination room where she apologizes for her reaction. He reveals that he has returned for good, although even he doesn't fully understand how the charges against him were dropped. Britt is stunned to learn Jason has already been back for 2 weeks without contacting her. Then comes another emotional twist. She reveals that she does not have Huntington's disease after all. Jason immediately embraces her, sharing in the overwhelming relief. Britt admits she made countless terrible decisions believing she was fighting for the little time she had left. Now she questions whether any of it was worth it. Jason refuses to let her blame herself. He reminds Britt how much good she has done, especially in trying to help Rocco, and encourages her to stop defining herself solely by her mistakes. To me, this was easily the strongest scene of the episode. Their chemistry immediately returns and both characters finally receive a moment of hope after years of heartbreak. Before Britt can fully explain everything involving Cassius, a nurse interrupts them. They agree to continue their conversation later. Then comes the moment many fans have been waiting for. Britt tells Jason she loves him. Without hesitation, Jason replies that he loves her too. I think this confirmation signals that the writers are fully committing to rebuilding their relationship. Ava begins telling the truth. Elsewhere, Ava meets Ethan and checks on how he is recovering. The conversation quickly shifts toward Phoebe's paternity. Ethan wants to know whether Ava has already told Brooklyn anything about Phoebe's real father. The episode leaves that question hanging, suggesting another major revelation is right around the corner. Final thoughts. This episode balanced suspense and emotion exceptionally well. Nina's apparent attack on Drew may have enormous consequences. Jax's alliance with Valentin remains fragile, and Ava's secret continues inching toward exposure. The biggest highlight, however, was unquestionably Jason and Britt's reunion. From Britt's emotional slap to their heartfelt embrace and mutual declaration of love, the scenes felt genuine and long overdue. Whether Drew truly died in the lake remains the episode's biggest mystery. I think there's a strong possibility the story is setting up an unexpected survival or an even larger conspiracy, but until more evidence appears, that remains only speculation.